you're gonna look great. But if you wanna stay in shape, well, you better hit the GymWits.
That's right, man. Tell 'em.
Welcome to the GymWits podcast. I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, aka Tips with Tony, your registered dietitian.
And we are the GymWits. So I had a terrifying and annoying situation happen today. Do either of you guys use like a password app, like something to store all of your passwords?
I should.
Okay, so I use one called One
But I don't.
Password, which is excellent. So I don't want to disparage the product too much, but I've been using it for a couple years now, and for a time, like to get your passwords, you had to type in a password. But then with the newer iPhones, you could just use the Touch ID. So for who knows how long, I've just been using Touch ID. Now, I use kind of a standard password for most of my stuff, and I guess I just assumed that's what I used for one password. So today I had to log in to find a password for something, and I started to do it, and I accidentally hit the button that prompts you to switch from Touch ID to manual, but then it won't let you switch back. And so I typed in the password I thought I had, and it wasn't the right password, and I freaked out. And then I tried. At some point, I wrote out like all these different configurations of all these different things that could potentially be it, and nothing worked. And I literally spent 3 hours. Luckily, I checked off the setting on the password on the app that would make it so that it like deletes itself after 3 like wrong attempts. Like you can do it so that if you have a number of wrong attempts, it'll just delete the whole thing. So I didn't have that checked off. So I got unlimited tries, but it took me like 3 hours until I finally figured it out. And it was like, if there's one password I use way too much, that was like the second password. And somehow that was the one thing of the like maybe few hundred configurations that I didn't try, but thankfully I was able to get my password
There
back.
was no one you could like call?
No, well, that's the other thing is you go into the app. So I logged in, I went into the website, like how do you recover a password? And it says like there's no way to recover. Basically, you try everything you can possibly try. Otherwise, you're out of luck because for your security, we don't store this online. It's not on our server. It's not stored locally. So if you don't know it, then best thing is to just delete the app and start over.
Wow. That's why I could never have that app.
I
Because I
hate to
forget
say
all
it,
my passwords.
but do you know what this is sounding a lot like?
What?
What?
I think we all know.
What?
I think we all know. So you can't you're having trouble logging into your passwords, figuring out your passwords to get into all of your modern, technology stuff that makes your life very convenient.
Yep.
Oh, it sounds like
You're saying first world problems?
Yes, but now it comes to think about it, it's not really that much of a first world problem because this is probably anywhere you go. Everyone is linked up, right? And maybe there's some people that not everyone has a smartphone or their life relies on computers, but almost everywhere you go, right? This is your link to the world, your work, right? So this is not, and while it is, yes, in general, it is a convenience, and the fact that we're able to have our technology do so much for us and help us with the work, it's like a first world problem.
No.
Well, yes, we're certainly more convenient, and the fact that we have access to it makes it a little bit of a first world problem, but really it's necessary. And passwords, I don't know about all our listeners, all you guys out there. I have spent way too much time trying to remember passwords, password resets, this and that. It's really a headache.
Well, no, it's the definition of a first world problem because in our society, I mean, so much of our lives is online, and with every venue or website or job or whatever it is, you have to have some kind of a password and account. It seems like you can't go anywhere without the account. So you really, these password managers become necessary to kind of participate in our society in some ways. And so I find for the most part, 1Password is very effective. There's other ones similar because it's loaded into the app so that if you're on like your smartphone and you have to log in a password, you can find the password through the app without even like opening the app. So it makes things very easy. So yeah, it is a first world problem, but as part of this first world, we kind of need it. And so it's just a frustration of crap. I'm going to lose all my passwords. I'm going to contact all these different places and do the whole forget your password. And then I work for a couple of gyms where I'm going to have to contact their IT department for the IT department to reset the password, and that becomes a hassle. So luckily it was averted, and I got to decide whether I use my generic password so that if somebody does find it and they do know my generic password, they'll just be able to get in, or if I stick with this one and hope that I don't forget that this is a password I used the next time I have to enter in the password.
It just sounds so complicated.
Yeah. All right. So, what do we have on tap for today?
I'm supposed to ask that question. We've got a great interview where we talk about Pilates with Trish DaCosta, right? Okay, I'm pronouncing it right. Cool. So yeah, it's a fun chat where we had to talk a little bit about Pilates. It is in itself a little bit of a buzzword. So we talk a little about what Pilates encompasses, how it can help you, and it's specifically how it can help people who weightlift, which we typically don't connect Pilates with weightlifting. So it's a great chat. So sit back, listen, and enjoy.
Hey everyone, we are here with Trish DaCosta. How's it going, Trish?
It's going great. I feel like the heat in San Diego is finally dying down a little bit. So
oh, nice.
Managing.
Yeah, it's awful here in New York, and one thing that you'll notice if you listen to a bunch of our interviews, we're always complaining about the weather, right? So if it's during winter, we're complaining about the snow. We had this really weird winter where it was just like snowing constantly, but not like fun snow, like really gross snow. And now it's super humid, and it's like been raining sheets over here in New York. So I guess you can't escape it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I used to live in New York. I'm from the East Coast originally. So I feel like I moved out here to get away from all that. And now somehow, now we have humidity all of a sudden. And that's that's not what I signed up for. So I feel you.
I'd love to go to San Diego. I hear it's beautiful out there most of the year.
You have to. You'll never want to leave.
Nice.
That's what happened to me.
So Trish is the founder of Barbell Pilates, barbellpilates.com. She's a Pilates instructor as well as a trainer. So the first thing we always ask is to tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into fitness.
Oh, man. I'll try to make this really short because it's been a lifetime. I've kind of been involved in fitness forever. I started really young, just kind of doing martial arts, Taekwondo specifically. And that's actually when I got into teaching fitness because at a very early age, I became an instructor. And I was teaching the kids and the adults martial arts. So that's kind of where I got my first taste of it. And then after college, I started doing just group fitness, like spin classes and so on. And I eventually got certified in personal training, but kind of maintained it as like a part-time gig because I really loved it. And I was, I still had a corporate job and all that stuff. So fitness has always been a passion of mine, obviously not just training, but always learning about it. Like even when I worked in corporate America, I was going to workshops with like Tony Gillencourt and reading everything that Mike Boyle put out, like I was still constantly researching on my own just for fun. So a couple of years ago, I left corporate America and started Barbell Pilates full time and started also training and teaching full time. So that's kind of the short version of how I got into fitness and training. And how I got into Pilates was kind of accidental, but I also did get certified in Pilates training. And it's been kind of a fun ride ever since.
So tell us about that. How did you discover Pilates? And I guess how does one accidentally find it? Yeah.
That's a great question. Cause, at the time, Pilates just wasn't super accessible. It's like Pilates is very well known to be kind of this like really expensive exercise method that like celebrities used, at least when I was in my 20s. So when I first discovered it, I was living in Boston. I was going to a commercial gym and they had like a mat Pilates class. And I thought, great, I could really use some core work. And that's actually how a lot of people, and in fact, women especially, get into Pilates because they're like, oh yeah, abs. I hear there's a lot of abs in Pilates. So that's how a lot of people stumble into it. And then I would kind of just do it on and off over the years. Like I never really took it seriously because I just never looked into it. Then as I started getting certified, and it was kind of also accidentally that I got certified in it, like I just was looking for something else to teach, and Pilates was interesting to me. I didn't really want to get into yoga. And it kind of just evolved and snowballed from there. But also at the time, I started doing Olympic weightlifting. I dabbled in CrossFit, and I had this like nagging shoulder injury. It was like a shoulder impingement that just would not go away no matter how much rest I gave it, what I was doing. And I think I was like 27. And I'm thinking, I'm way too young to be feeling this sort of pain and not be able to overhead press. This is ridiculous. So as I was doing all of my Pilates teacher training and doing a mentorship with a master and instructor, I was also practicing Pilates regularly. And I just accidentally realized that I was like rehabbing my shoulder injury, and everything else that I was doing, all the running and the lifting that I was doing, was improving and feeling a lot better. And I think that's when it finally clicked that I was like, oh my gosh, there's actually something here. I wish all my other strength friends and like CrossFit friends, had access to this, because so many of them are complaining about the same issues, the shoulder injuries, the back pain, and like all those things I was kind of just solving on my own by consistently following a Pilates practice. That was actually how barbellpilates.com was born.
Cool. So I guess there's a bunch to unpack from that. So I guess my first question, since you're already talking about Barbell Pilates, maybe explain. So I guess does your program combine the weightlifting with the Pilates, or is it more using the Pilates in a way that's kind of complementary towards the weightlifting? And then maybe tell us a little bit more about the program and how it would work for somebody who's, let's say, an Olympic lifter or a weightlifter or bodybuilder who maybe doesn't really see the value in Pilates.
Oh yeah, totally. So I actually use Pilates to complement someone's strength training. So being a trainer and like someone who does powerlifting and stuff, like I'm a strength girl. I love to lift. Like that's my number one thing. But with age and with years and years of you beating up your body in that way or moving in the same movement plane over and over, you start to get the same injuries, the same stiffness, the same mobility issues that, not just for me, but that I see across the board with anyone who's in like the strength or barbell world. So what I've done is, I either work with athletes who really need something like a mobility training plan, but they don't necessarily want to be doing drills. Like they still want to feel like they're working out. And so Pilates is a great complement to really any kind of fitness activity, whether you're a runner or a cyclist. And because it doesn't beat up your body, it still feels like a workout, and it really takes care of a lot of the issues that I would say 99% of the population experiences, which is, stiffness in their spine, ankle and feet mobility issues, shoulder mobility issues, or stability, core activation, all those things. And it just makes you think of your movement quality and your control totally different than what you would get out of a strength training program. Because, when you lift, like you're thinking about your technique and form and all that stuff. You might have tempo or to think about, but you're also thinking about, I need to move this weight and lift it. Like you're thinking about powering through an exercise. You're not thinking about, say, is my breathing in sync with this movement? And is my pelvic placement correct? And do I know how to actually turn on this or that muscle to stabilize me during this movement? You know what I mean? So it takes care of the details that strength training misses. And what most people don't know about Pilates, and this is one of the things that really drew me to it, is that the creator of it, Joseph Pilates, when he created this method, it was never meant to be like this standalone exercise or fitness regimen. It was meant to complement all the other stuff he was doing. You know, he was an athlete himself. He dabbled in gymnastics. He was a skier and a diver and so forth. So it was meant to complement all of his activities. So yes, I do offer. I also use Pilates with a lot of my clients, either as part of their warm up. I might just use a few principles or exercises. It just depends on kind of like what they need the most, especially if they're coming to me specifically, you know, I just want to get strong or I want to get fit or lose weight. I'm not going to spend all of our time doing Pilates because that probably might not fit with their goal. But in terms of prehabbing or rehabbing or teaching them, you know, how to move their spine correctly or something like that, I use Pilates in like little drills or little exercises.
So it all sounds fantastic. Let's take a step back.
Okay.
So I'm trying to picture what Pilates is. Now I've seen some of the machines that are used, but maybe not everyone actually knows what it is or what the exercises are. Or how it's done. So could you give us a brief explanation of what Pilates is and how it works? Because we sort of skipped over that, and I think that's kind of important so we could get a visual.
Yeah, definitely. This is actually one of the toughest questions I think every Pilates expert instructor faces because the description is so vague. So I'll do my best to kind of describe it. So all in all, Pilates is it's a total body conditioning method that focuses on strengthening, lengthening your muscles all at once. It develops coordination, stability, and control simultaneously. So with that description, it could really be anything. So how I like to think of it is a lot of people compare it to yoga. They'll say like, oh, Pilates, it's like yoga, right? But for abs. And what it really is, there is like a sequence of movements, but it's definitely a lot of, you're not holding poses. It's really meant to just flow. And there's a huge emphasis on like spinal movement and joint stability and joint control. But even though those things are emphasized in a Pilates, like say class or exercise, you're not really thinking about those things because you're so focused on like the quality of the movement or the breadth of the movement and just trying to gain control of like these smaller muscles. So I like to think of, say, a really easy example. Well, I hope it's easy. So you let me know if it doesn't make sense, but is think of your basic gym crunch, right? We go into the gym and you see people and they're kind of like just cranking at the neck or they're jamming their chest forward towards their thighs. And they're like, this is my ab exercise. And in Pilates, there's something we call the C curl, which is a position, which is basically a flexed position of the spine. And we're trying to create the C shape or C curve in our spine. And it comes back again and again and again on pretty much every single exercise in Pilates. So what we're teaching in, say, C curl is to take someone away from their usual gym crunch and teach them the full purpose of the exercise, which is not just one abdominal, exercise, but all of the abdominals. How can you stretch and open up the back and the spine in flexion while also turning on your TA and all the other core muscles that you need to flex your spine, like how to move your rib cage so that you can maximize the stretch portion of the exercise, but also the muscle portion of the exercise. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. I have a question about how you mentioned that it helps with your shoulder, because I know that Pilates is great for the core, which having a strong core supports your back. Mm-hmm. But can you explain how it would help heal someone's shoulder? Because honestly, when you were talking, like I'm 28, my right shoulder, like there keeps happening with something. So I felt like you were describing me, and I'm just trying to figure out like if Pilates could actually help my shoulder.
Yeah. So, Joseph Pilates is kind of considered like a grandfather or the godfather of physical therapy. And when you learn some basic Pilates exercises for like the shoulder joint, you've done any physical therapy for the shoulder, you're like, these are very similar. And that's because that's purposeful. So the use of Pilates, especially with the equipment like the Reformer or the Cadillac, there's these very light springs or resistance. And there are these exercises that specifically are meant to just work all the little muscles around the shoulder. So I think something I see a lot, and this happened to me, and it probably led to part of my shoulder injury, was that I had really rounded shoulders, like that internally rotate shoulders from just sitting at a desk all the time. And my traps are super overactive. And they take over everything. But my poor rhomboids, just are always late to the party and don't do its job. So things like that is Pilates kind of teaches you without you even realizing, because you're doing these very small micro movements sometimes with very light resistance to just activate these little muscles that probably just have a harder time activating and doing its job and readjusting you. So there's a lot of exercises in Pilates that are also very focused on your spine. I mean, every exercise is focused on your spine in Pilates. And that's another thing that contributes to a lot of shoulder impingement or shoulder pain. And it was one of the things that contributed to my problems, just having a really stiff back, not being able to open up my chest, not being able to extend my spine. And therefore, my scapula had just moved in this really suboptimal position and couldn't really move. I think when I first started teaching Pilates, or rather when I first got certified, I had kind of like a winged scapula. And with time, I've been able to correct that by doing Pilates. I haven't actually done any physical therapy, even though I'm not saying Pilates should replace physical therapy. However, a lot of physical therapists do end up sending their clients or their patients to us as part of their rehab program after a certain time, so that they can keep up with whatever it is that they were taught during their physical therapy. Does that help?
Yeah.
I can clarify more.
No, it's perfect. Thank you.
So I have a question. So with your program for weightlifters, how does it differ from traditional Pilates? Like, is there anything you do specifically that focuses more on people that lift weights versus like somebody who's traditional, just I want to go to Pilates to work on my core, just get increase neuromuscular control? Like, is there a difference, or is it mostly the same?
Well, my program, so I have this online course, it's called Pilates Flow WOD, and when I made it, it was specific to like people that love to lift and weightlifters, CrossFitters, and so forth. And I mean, I stick true to the Pilates method. Like, I'm not getting cutesy and doing my own spin on exercises. I'm really teaching Pilates in the most traditional way that it was created by Joseph Pilates. However, the way I teach it, and it really in the program, but also just, if I was working with a strength athlete, I teach it in a way that it relates to or explain it in a way that relates back to their sport. So, when I think about, say a squat, for instance, or someone has some ankle mobility issues, and I'm like, okay, so in this exercise, yes, we're focused on core. We have shoulder stability happening at the same time. But in just the subtle movement of the ankle, working dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, you're also doing X, Y, Z. This is mobilizing your spine. There's all this type of footwork in Pilates that happens in various exercises or that happen on some of the equipment. Kind of lost my train of thought there, but it does. I think it's more of just the translation, if that makes sense. Like, there aren't that many Pilates instructors that have a background in weightlifting or in CrossFit or in powerlifting. Doesn't mean that they don't know a lot of the issues that we go through physically, but maybe they can't talk to that population as well, mainly because they don't do those types of exercises. So I think that's what makes my program different, that I'm really looking at what are the biggest issues that lifters face. And, it's a hip mobility issue. It's a core stability issue for many people, which can lead into the hip mobility problems. It's definitely shoulder health. It's also ankle and foot joint stability there. So I kind of address those and spine, and address all those big points in relation to how they move in the weight room.
So I never knew that Pilates was actually just named after, or was a guy's name. Do you think that there was a guy somewhere back in the day named like John Weightlifting, and that's how weightlifting came to be?
Hey, it's possible. I mean, you never think about the names of things at all because you're just like, oh yeah, kettlebells. Like, is there a guy named
maybe there was
Kettlebells?
like Linda Kettlebells or something like that.
Yeah, in fact, actually, the Pilates method wasn't called that when he was alive. He called it controlology, which is so not a cool name, if you ask.
But I actually think, having done a little Pilates, I think that's a really appropriate name, because I think you always hear, as you mentioned, like Pilates is good for the core, and so a lot of people, that's the primary objective. And I'm sure for you, even as an instructor, it could be a little difficult if they think they're going to get like a ripped six pack doing Pilates.
Yeah.
But the controlology actually makes sense because, again, I did about 10 sessions with somebody who was like doing their instructor training, and I felt like that was the thing that I got out of it, was control. It was like learning how to control your body. That was the real value, more than like really anything else. It really just taught me, again, like how to control myself when I'm sitting down or when I'm in certain positions. Just really helped with that.
I think a better name would have been actually. Sorry, what were you saying?
I'm sorry. Controlology is just a hard word to say.
It could have been like contrology. There's an extra all in there that's like unnecessary, like contrology. I think.
Yeah, it's just too hard to say.
So, you focus a lot of clearly your focus is towards weightlifters, strength athletes, but oftentimes those athletes, people that are really into their weightlifting or bodybuilding, might look at Pilates and say, "Oh, I don't need that, right? This is something that's not for me." So, how do you convince people who are very set in their ways, whether they do CrossFit or they're a bodybuilder or a powerlifter? How do you convince them that Pilates is a wonderful supplement for what they do?
Oh man, that's a tough one because. There are a couple of ways. One, I find that the people that reject Pilates the most they tend to be younger. They're like the young, like early 20s something. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, but at that age, like you're healthy, like you can crush 3-hour workouts and then have a few beers and go out the next night. Like you just crush life basically. So those are the folks I think that are rejected because they don't feel like they need it. The ones that tend to come to Pilates come to me usually because they've had an injury or they're starting to get older and they're realizing like, oh crap, I have no flexibility, or my lifting's getting a little sloppy, or like I'm constantly like achy or something. And they don't know what else to do because they're doing like hip flexor stretches all the time, or they do a little bit of yoga, but they don't really love it. They don't really stick with it. So I think it's tough because I introducing Pilates to the weight training world is kind of new. I mean, a lot of athletes do Pilates, but it's like something that I don't even know how they find out. I think it's like maybe their wives bring them in, or their PT is like, you really need to do Pilates after you're done here with me. So I think that's an injury tends to lead people towards Pilates or post-injury. And with age, they also go to Pilates. So really right now, it's just about just trying to educate the strength and the lifting community that there is another option to their prehab or to their recovery work that isn't just another mobility drill or foam rolling or yoga. All those things are great. They all work. they're, foam rolling, all that stuff. It's still necessary. But at the end of the day, in your workout, doing just 1 or 2 drills for, say, I don't know, your ankle a week isn't really going to solve your ankle mobility problem, or the knee issue that is a result of your ankle problem, or the shoulder, or like 2 or 3 drills for your shoulder the one day you do overhead pressing is also not going to solve the aches and pains that you have with your shoulder if, say, you have a winging or tipped scapula. So I think it's more about educating people on the benefits, and then it's really just getting people to try it. Like I've had, some lifters at my gym who just come in and they'll just try a session with me, or they'll pay for a couple of sessions. Or even when I was doing my teacher training a few years back, I just started like handing out free workouts for people because I wanted them to really feel the difference. And it's not until you feel it and you're like, oh crap, I'm actually not as strong as I thought I was.
So my reason why I think I struggle with even just fitting in yoga and foam rolling, which I totally should do with my strength training program, is usually time, right? Like if I'm doing strength training like 5-6 days a week, which I'm doing, and then some cardio, it's like where do you fit it in? And so I guess my question is, if you were to make the time, like how much is enough time to really feel the benefits from it? Because you're saying like a couple little things here and there isn't enough. So what would be kind of the gold standard for someone who's trying to really take themselves to the next level? How many times a week or how long would someone have to do Pilates every day, each week? Let's say total for the week.
I totally get that because, when I'm like training for a competition, I also, I don't have time to like go to the studio 3 times a week and fit in 3 extra hours of Pilates into my workouts. So I get that. And there are a couple ways to address this. So if you are brand new to Pilates, you've never done it before, and let's say you have a little downtime in your training cycle, like you're not competing or in a meet prep or something, definitely take the time to work with a reputable instructor and not go to like one of those, I hate to describe it this way, but it's kind of what it is, one of those like big scale, super cheap, like studios that have like 16 reformers in a room, because you're never going to get the attention you need. So it is worth your time and your money to work with someone who's going to give you, if not one-on-one attention for a few sessions or something, but in a small group setting where you really just learn the basics. You learn the fundamentals of how to flex, extend, bend and twist your spine. You learn some of the mat sequence, which you can do at home once you learn it. And work with that person a few times. I would say like anywhere from like 5 to 10 times if you were doing, say, a private session, so that you can really get it in your body and then start incorporating it into your regular life. For someone who's adding Pilates into their routine, like as, say, a workout as part of their recovery, I would say a minimum of 2 times a week is where you want to start. And then if you're in a cycle of your training where it's not super intense, try to go for 3 times a week. Now, with that said, I realize that can be unrealistic for some people. So what I like to do is that once I've taught someone the basics or the fundamentals of Pilates, and they kind of get in their body and know some of like the exercises that they can do on the mat, not necessarily the equipment, I give people certain exercises that they include as part of their warm-up every single time. So I created this like free little ebook it was like the warm-up guide. It's still on my website if anyone wants to sign up for it. That includes like a specific warm-up routine for a day that you're doing bench, a day that you're doing squats, a day that you're doing deadlifts. And then there's like an extra like hip and mobility, very specific Pilates warm-up or recovery routine. And what I do in that is that I maybe sprinkle in 2 or 3 Pilates focused exercises in addition to these other dynamic warm-up exercises that you might typically have, like the world's greatest stretch or band walks and things like that, as to keep reinforcing some of those Pilates-based movements, but also make it work for their routine. Or I also, for those who don't want to do that and maybe have their own routine, make it as part of their recovery. Like when you do a cool down, I gotta say I'm the worst at like cooling down after a workout. Like I foam roll and I want to get out. But when I do a few, like the first 10 exercises of the Pilates mat sequence, and there is an order to it, so it shouldn't change. It takes less than 5 minutes. I tend to address all the things that I need, which is spine, back movement. I address a lot of core activation, hip mobility, and I'm done within 10 exercises. So it really just depends on how much time you're willing to give it just to learn the fundamentals, and then how you want to incorporate it into your routine, which is also another reason I created that online course, because it's like short little snippets of, okay, today you need to work, you have a overhead day or you're going to be benching today. Here's this like 10-minute shoulder health or shoulder mobility Pilates routine that you can do online, basically.
Cool. So on your website, you also have an interesting blog with some great kind of topics. And so I think the most recent one, which I'd love for you to explain a little bit, because one of our pet peeves is the use of the word toning in the fitness industry. So maybe if you can say, we've done it before, but if we have some new listeners or someone who hasn't listened to one of our many episodes where we talk about the annoyance of that word, maybe explain what people think they mean by toning and what it really means and how it does affect people, when it comes to exercise.
Really, the only thing that toning should be is when you listen to our resident dietitian, Tony.
Yeah.
So that's, that should be the only true definition of toning.
You had to work hard for that one, Justin.
I used to, I read that one. It was like, I was kind of just annoyed with, I never liked the word toning, but I get what it means. And I was kind of just annoyed with the industry being like, toning is for printers and let's stop talking about this lifting weights. It makes you bulky myth. Like, let's just do it with it. And as trainers, like, we get sick of it because we hear it all the time. But for like your regular, mom or, the career lawyer executive that comes to see you, she doesn't know any other word because she, reads Shape magazine and women's health. Like, those are the words that they're using. So I think it really helps, one, from the trainer side, to let's listen to what the client is really saying. And most of the time they don't really know what they mean when they say tone up, but what toning does mean typically for women is, I want to lose a little bit of body fat and I want to build some definition, but I also want to look good. Like, I'm not trying to necessarily look like I'm a CrossFit athlete. I mean, I think CrossFit girls look amazing and I love that body type. But for a lot of these women, when they use the word toning, that's really not what they mean. And if you ask them, like, okay, can you describe that in more detail? Like, is there a celebrity that you're thinking of? Like, describe this body tone thing? They're not going to point to like a power lifter. They're going to point to some celebrity they saw in the newsstand or something like that. So that's what the main, like, the toning thing is and what it means. But I think it's also important from women in general to start understanding that toning is just the sexy marketing version of saying building muscle, because that's what it is. It probably doesn't sound as sexy as the word toning, but muscle is what creates the shape in our body. It's how we alter the shape in our bodies. And you have to train those muscles with resistance. You can't just cardio your way into it. I think you asked another question, but I forgot what it is.
No, I think that was mostly it. But I guess you did mention, so obviously, we hear toning, we hear it with men and women, we hear it more with women. So for you as a trainer, do you train women different from men at all? And are there any differences that you notice that, whether it's physiologically or psychologically, where you find you have to have a different approach dealing with men and women?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is kind of yes and no. So I believe that men and women can train the same in the sense that they're still going to squat. They're still going to do, chin-ups and rows and carries. Like, for the most part, the movement patterns for across the board is going to be the same. Now, there are some fundamental differences with women and men that we need to take into consideration. And all it means is that I might emphasize something with them that I don't necessarily emphasize with the dudes that I work with. So for instance, women just have different mobility needs than men do. And the majority of the women that come to me are really hypermobile. So their problem isn't flexibility. Their problem is stability. They don't know how to control their joints, So like I might make them do a stretch and they can bend all over the place. And that actually puts them in a more dangerous position when they're moving, because like they're just hanging out in their joints and they're locking out all crazy. I mean, if you've ever seen a super like hypermobile person, like a gymnast, you're just like, whoa, how do you move like that? So I think that's one of the biggest differences about training women that I have to keep in mind. And it's teaching more stabilities, and also strengthening them around their hips. Now, I know all of my girls are like down with this because they're like, yes, butt exercises, make my butt look great. And that's kind of what we're doing, but I kind of disguise it in sexy butt exercises, but we're really just working the muscles around the hip most of the time. And when you think about how structurally how women are built, and I'm not talking about every woman, but I would say the majority is, we might be a little knock-kneed than men are. We, for childbearing reasons, our hormones change, which then, have an effect in how flexible and bendy our ligaments get over time, and depending different cycles and phases in your life. And then they just require, because of those things, and this is like pre-baby, never mind after having a baby, there's like a whole host of things to think about. But women just tend to require a little more hip strengthening work, a lot of single leg work. We do a lot of lateral band walking, and a lot of stability and control over their joints, because they're so prone to injury. Like, think about ACL injuries. I read somewhere today that those injuries have gone up like 900% since the 70s, which is insane to me. But then again, girls are playing more sports than ever. But because of how they're built structurally, the way that they jump or the way that they land just puts them at greater risk for these injuries. You also have to think about how women dress differently than men. Like, we love our high heels for the most part. We're going to keep wearing them, or maybe we're required to wear them all day for work reasons. And that already puts it at a huge disadvantage. Like, I get so many women who are really stiff around their ankle, and then they have like, different, like an anterior pelvic tilt, and they're kind of just always living in this like sort of this functional pattern that's been building for years and years and years and years. So those are things I just have to address differently with women. I'm not necessarily going to spend, give as many of, say, like band exercises for the hip or something, and do as many clamshells that I might do with a female client as I would do with a guy. For a guy, I focus a little bit differently. Just depends on them.
Awesome. So, Trish, where can we find you? Where can we reach you? I know you have a website, and I'm sure you have some cool social media stuff as well. And then you have a new product that's out, correct?
Yeah. So there are a couple ways to find me. So you can head over to my website. It's called barbellpilates.com. There we have weekly content. I put out a new blog post every single week. And you can sign up for my newsletter there, or download any of like the little freebies I have. So you can get on the list and you'll always know about new products and services. The way to reach me like in fast time, or find me, is on Instagram. I'm there a lot. I love Instagram, and that is at Trish D Fit. And that's kind of where I post a lot of things and where I can answer messages really quickly. And in terms, if people are interested in exploring Pilates and how it can really benefit their training, they can sign up for I have a free like 3-part series, like video series on my website, where they can get 3 free videos. There's one on spine, there's one on hip mobility, and I forget what the other one is. I think it's core. it's core activation. And it's really teaching you the very foundational principles of Pilates and how it relates to your lifting and strength purposes. And they're like little mini workouts to reinforce those lessons. And then from there, if they're into it, I do have the online course called Pilates Flow WOD, and it includes those 3 foundation videos, and there's several other videos and little workouts that teach you Pilates. And it focuses, like maybe on hips and then core and then, shoulder and pelvic health. And then towards the end, you have more comprehensive workouts that are like for beginners that are full length, intermediate level, a foam rolling Pilates workout that they can do. So it just makes it really accessible for you to use Pilates as your accessory or recovery work, and you can do it directly from home. You have access to it for life. And right now it's actually on sale. So it's perfect time to get it.
Nice. Awesome. Well, Trish, thank you so much for coming on the GymWits. That was actually really enlightening. I didn't know very much about Pilates. I don't know if a lot of our listeners know very much about it or how many of them participate in Pilates, but that was excellent, and I'm glad that we had you on.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I love talking about this topic, clearly, but and I definitely want, as many people to at least give it a shot. Or try Pilates on their own, because it's so beneficial for just like your longevity in any sport, any activity that you do. So even if you're not a lifter, I mean, you'll still get a lot of benefit from it.
Excellent. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming on the GymWits.
Thank you. This was fun.
So before we get into the discussion about Pilates in this really cool interview that we just had, I've been having my own version of Ryan's first world problem of forgetting his passwords. I've been having so many technical issues today with my equipment. I have a mixing board that I've been using, and I feel like channels on my board are been blown out, which means I can't use them, and I've been trying to troubleshoot. So that's also a bit of a first world problem, the fact that I have all this cool equipment, and it makes recording much easier. For those who don't know, before, say, 25 years ago, when you recorded something, it was a much more difficult process, right? I guess there was digital recording for a while, but it was much more complicated. You had equipment was much bigger, and before computers recorded everything, you had to record to some sort of big piece of equipment, whether it was tape or something along those lines, and it was to set something to record took a lot of time and was very expensive. And now we're all able to do our podcast. All you need is the recorder on your phone, and you can just upload your audio, and that's all you need. And it used to be difficult, so I've been dealing with my version of that all day, and it's just been driving me crazy. So, Ryan, I feel your pain with the passwords. So that's that. But about Pilates, I didn't know that it was actually a guy's name.
Yeah. I knew that. I'm surprised. I guess so. I guess you wouldn't know if you were not in it. Yeah. So I've heard. Yeah, like I've heard about Joseph Pilates, whatever it is. So that kind of I'd heard about that for a while.
Now, I first heard of Pilates when I was in high school, right? Because Ryan used to read them as well, but we would buy the magazines, Flex magazine, maybe even Men's Health on occasion. And I remember seeing an article about how the NBA star Jason Kidd used Pilates. And at the time, I was like, I had sort of heard it, but I didn't know what it was, and I still didn't really know what it was after reading the article. But that's how I became aware of it for the first time. And I don't know how long Pilates have been popular for, and I certainly had my conception about it that it was something that more women did, and it was a more low impact. And I know that's starting to change as a lot of professional athletes are doing it. And after listening to this interview, it's something that I would really like to get into, because I know I'm probably not going to do yoga seriously ever. I don't like stretching, even though I should. And I'm just, as I mentioned, I'm ripe for an injury. Something is going to happen. And if I can mitigate this or prehab or whatever it is, I think it's something that I'm going to get into. Ryan, do you think you would ever want to go into that? But you do you're pretty good with stretching, right? So do you think it's something that you would need to do?
I see the value in it, and like I said, I haven't done it before. I would like to do it. It's finding the time for me. That's the main thing. Yeah, I don't stretch enough. Even when I teach plenty of classes and I lead stretches, and I still don't stretch. So I do need to get a handle on that, because I think as you get older, the body needs those modalities that kind of help you restore yourselves and recover and kind of correct certain imbalances and really kind of teach you control. And so I would like to do it. It might be one of those things I may have to just like bite the bullet and do one-on-one training in order to really get that done, because I have a hard time kind of committing the time to something like that.
Now, I know, Tony, it seemed like something you were very interested in as well.
Well, the thing that she said that really kind of felt like, okay, this is something I could do and it's realistic, is incorporating it in my warm-up and cool down. I think that would really work, because when we did the episode with the yoga instructor with Crystal, that motivated me, inspired me to put yoga back into my routine, because I'm not doing a great job at fitting in my recovery days. My recovery days are either usually a walk or I'm off. I'm not doing foam rolling. I'm not stretching or doing yoga like I should. So it's something that I've been thinking about incorporating since then. So it's definitely on top of my mind right now. It's just a matter of figuring out when and getting the discipline to just do it, because it's important. It's very important.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think we all see the kind of value in it, and hopefully we'll get around to incorporating it, because I think me 10 years from now will appreciate it if I can start. It's better to get a head start on it than to do it because you have to, or because a doctor says you have to. All right, well, that's it. As usual, all of our stuff is at thegymwits.com. Social media can be found there. We're on Instagram, on Facebook. Definitely check us out. If you haven't subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't downloaded the GymWits app, download the GymWits app. Leave your reviews. We're everywhere. So, try to be wherever podcasts are. And if we're not, then let us know and we'll find a way there. So that is it. Tony, where can people find you?
On Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, mostly Instagram and Facebook. Tips with Tony. That's Tony with an I.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm Ryan George.
I'm Justin Guild, aka Chef Sonic, reminding you that truth does not sell.
And I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.
And we are the GymWits.